Hi, I'm JimClassic, and on my last video of Geekin It with JimClassic, who happens to be me, which also was my first episode of JimClassic, also featuring me, I was talking about the 80s animated cartoon show of M.A.S.K, or Mobile Armored Strike Command, and I'd like to continue with a few more thoughts that I had about the cartoon show. One of the things I thought was kind of strange about M.A.S.K, which kind of amused me, was the fact that they're wearing full-on, helmets that covers their faces, for the most part. And yet, a lot of these characters still succumbed, were influenced by, smoke inhalation and knockout gas or whatever. They'd still be coughing and hacking, and I'm thinking, their faces are completely covered. You would think there'd be a respirator or gas mask in there somewhere. There are only two masks that I can think of that have the open mouth, and that's Alex Sector and his Jackrabbit mask, and Hondo McClane and his mask, even though I don't remember the name of it. They're the only two with the open mouth, and I could see why they would succumb to the knockout gas or whatever, but everyone else, well, it really shouldn't have been a problem for them. It's just a little nitpick, but I still thought it was kind of weird. Why did Matt Trakker build the masks? What was his motivation? And why does Venom have the same technology? And this is something the cartoon show really doesn't seem to cover. This is a question I had to look up on the internet, because the cartoon show really doesn't explain it. The cartoon doesn't have an origin story which would explain everything. There is an episode, however, called The Green Nightmare, where we get a glimpse of some flashbacks of Matt Trakker's father finding a tribal village, befriending the natives there, and he receives a crystal from the natives, and apparently this crystal is what powers the masks. Well, okay, well, that's a hint to what the show was about, but that's really all I've seen. That's the only thing in the cartoon show that covers anything close to an origin story, and it didn't tell me that much. And the fact that there is no first episode, that really kind of irks me. There are other cartoon shows that had an origin story, and like Transformers, for example. I think He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, oh, no, alright, no, they didn't, but Prince Adam did do the exposition at the beginning of each episode, which I guess kind of counts. I think the 2002 reboot had an origin story, which I prefer, but whatever. Hell, even Teen Titans had an origin story. For some reason, they didn't do it until the 5th and final fucking season, but at least it had an origin story. So, since Venom and M.A.S.K have the exact same technology, one thing I thought was really strange in the cartoon show is that Miles Mayhem doesn't know who the M.A.S.K characters are. There was one episode where he did discover their secret identities, and it was actually a pretty fun episode where he tried to blackmail Matt Trakker, but after the end of the episode, of course, he magically forgot, because the reason he had learned their knowledge was through some sort of a magical device anyway. I find this a little strange that in the cartoon show, Venom is unaware of M.A.S.K's true identity. And I bring this up because I have this one comic book of M.A.S.K from the 80s. It's by DC Comics, and it's issue number 4. And just by reading this little bit, Venom and M.A.S.K, they know each other. M.A.S.K are public figures, and Venom actually, I think in this one, Venom kidnaps Matt Trakker's son Scott in order to blackmail Matt Trakker, and like I said, he's a public figure, and they all know it. And now around, I think it was 1985, DC Comics had picked up the rights to produce the M.A.S.K comics, and it started off with a 4-issue miniseries. Now, since this is issue 4, I'm assuming this is part of the 4-issue miniseries, but it did continue on with a regular issue series that only lasted 9 series. So, if I'm not too much mistaken, I think that's 13 issues total, and I guess that's as far as M.A.S.K lasted in the comics, which you know, that really does kind of stink. I'm sure this would have continued on to something really cool later on, but, you know, as I've said before, I would love to see a reboot of M.A.S.K, and maybe one day it'll happen. However, after doing some further internet research about M.A.S.K, I learned a few things that the cartoon show doesn't seem to cover as well. And it shouldn't be any surprise. The comics and cartoons are usually different from each other. And but it would have been nice for the cartoon show to have covered a few things, because again, it goes back to an origin story and learning more about M.A.S.K. But apparently, the leader of Venom, Miles Mayhem, does have a twin brother, and his name is Maximus Mayhem, which I actually kind of like that name. But in the comics, Miles Mayhem, Maximus Mayhem, and Matt Tracker's brother, Andy Tracker, were associates or friends, and they developed the M.A.S.K technology together, which, you know, okay, that makes a lot of sense, and that could have played into the cartoons. Miles Mayhem and Maximus killed Andy Tracker and stole half of the technology, and I guess went into business for themselves. I guess this was used to jumpstart Venom, which would explain why Matt Tracker is now part of M.A.S.K. He probably wants, you know, to put Miles Mayhem and Maximus behind bars. And that would have been great to put in the cartoon series. Even if the cartoon, they didn't want Maximus and Miles to kill Andy Tracker, they could have at least toned it down a little bit to that they stole the technology. And again, Matt Tracker wants to hunt them down to get the technology back. That would have made perfect sense, and I would have liked to have seen that. That shed a lot of light on this mystery. But again, I guess the question is, why the hell would the cartoon show leave this stuff out? I mean, sure, for a kid's cartoon, maybe they didn't want the Mayhem brothers to kill anybody, but at the very least, they could have stolen the technology. Something else I thought pretty strange was I stumbled upon an episode on the internet titled Where Eagles Dare. And in this episode, you see Maximus Mayhem and Miles Mayhem together. Well, I watched the complete series here, and I did not come across this. And I checked on the back of each episode, and I didn't see the title. And as it turns out, even though this says the complete series, it's not the complete series. This is only season 1. Season 2 only lasted 11 episodes, and those 11 episodes are not in this DVD set. So it's not really the complete series, is it? And that kind of pisses me off. Now, I can find these episodes on YouTube, and I intend to watch them, because I'd like to know what else happens. Hell, as far as I know, maybe there's an Origins episode, or some kind of you know, Origins information that's in these other 11 episodes. I have no clue. But I'm going to watch them, and, you know, maybe I'll do a follow-up on this later. But, you know, you don't put the complete series on here if you don't have the complete series on here, because that's just not right. You don't do that. Anyway, moving on. I found this episode kind of cool because we see an underground Venom base. It looks like Mayhem has his own stormtroopers, which is kind of cool. And this is the only time you see these generic troopers who are not part of the main Venom team. M.A.S.K doesn't even have their own army, so I guess Venom's a little bit more organized than, you know, than you'd expect them to be. This episode I actually really liked. I found it to be the most interesting episode out of all of them. It's called Secret of the Andes. And at the beginning of the episode, you see this man frozen in ice, and he is eventually thawed. And he's an Incan shaman by the name of Tupac. Well, no, definitely not. But he is resuscitated once he's thawed out from the ice. And he mistakes T-Bob as a god and wants to escort him to an ancient city. They might have even said El Dorado, but I don't remember the name now. You know, it's an ancient city full of gold, and of course Venom wants to get in on this, and they want to steal it, and M.A.S.K has got to stop them. But I thought it was a really fun episode. You kind of rarely see that in those old cartoons where someone is mistaken for a god. I mean, I know Transformers did it too, but I can't think of anything else. Moving on to T-Bob, he and Scott just wander around in public and nobody seems to notice that there's a robot walking around. I mean, hell, T-Bob has been directly witnessed by Venom agents, and none of them have even realized that the son of a rich philanthropist, Matt Tracker, has the same robot. They're kind of dummies, I guess. Much of the dialogue and many of the lines in Mask are just... I don't know. You'll have to see for yourself.
But I don't see no gold.
They wouldn't leave it out in the open, stupid.
Hey, he must be in a good mood. He usually calls me idiot.
I told you it pays to work hard.
You didn't strain yourself. The monks were a pushover.
Well, Mr. 007.
What?
A hammer. All that trouble for a crummy toy hammer.
Hey, it's not a waste. Maybe someday you'll get some toy nails.
Swerve out of this one, Mask.
With a dramatic pause.
Looks like I almost got cut from the team.
Lastly, I would like to cover one other topic, and that would be the Switchblade, which is Miles Mayhem's vehicle. Even as a child, I never liked the Switchblade because I guess I just didn't understand it. It's a helicopter which transforms into a jet. It's a flying thing that transforms into another flying thing. And both can be used for combat. And I just didn't get it. Like with the other M.A.S.K vehicles, it is a normal vehicle which transforms into a war machine of death. What Miles Mayhem has is a war machine of death which transforms into a war machine of death. And maybe it's because he's the bad guy, and maybe he just wants to, murder vehicles as his transport of choice. And I guess, all right, maybe in that respect it makes sense, but I just would have liked a little bit more variation. Like, well, if Miles Mayhem had taken pointers from Dr. Claw, that would have been pretty cool. A car that turns into a jet, which turns into a submarine. That would have been pretty cool, having a triple changer M.A.S.K vehicle, and maybe have Miles Mayhem be the guy who has that one. That could be interesting.